In the bleak, intemperate spring of 1932, the President of the United States found 3 children on his doorstep. Their father was an unemployed laborer from Detroit, arrested on a charge of auto theft while en route home from a job hunting trip out west. Soon after, the trio of unhappy youngsters set off for the nation's capital. Believing that the man in the White House was possessed of unlimited powers, they were determined to lay their case before him. The president's advisors thought him far too busy to hear such an appeal. There was, after all, a worldwide depression to combat, a sullen and jittery nation to reassure, a political campaign to organize. Herbert Hoover thought otherwise. Put it, 3 children resourceful enough to manage to get to Washington to see me are going to see me. Now, Bernice, Hoover remarked to the 13-year-old leader of the pack, tell me the whole story. As he listened, the muscles in his face twitched in an effort to control his emotions. And when she was finished, the president said that there must be a great deal of good in any man whose children were so devoted. Then he took from his desk a keepsake for each. I want you to have this to remember me by, he told them. Now run along and go straight home. Dad will be waiting for you. A few minutes later, Presidential Press Secretary Theodore Roosevelt entered the Oval Office to find his employer staring out the window, fighting back tears. Get that father out of jail immediately, said Hoover. Jocelyn asked permission to share the highly charged encounter with the press. It was exactly the kind of story that would humanize the dour chief executive, drawing out the compassion that had once made him a global hero. Hoover would have none of it. The children might remember his act of kindness, but neither it nor they would be exploited for political advantage. The Quaker president, uncomfortable with displays of emotion, elevated his shortcomings to the level of principle. This is not a showman's job, he said. You can't make a Teddy Roosevelt out of me. This was simply acknowledging the obvious. It's hard to imagine 2 men more dissimilar, even though Hoover, as a matter of fact, in 1912, bolted the Republican Party to support TR's Bull Moose campaign. They were both progressives. That's about where the similarities end. Unless you want to find 2 men even more dissimilar, you might think about TR and his prosaic predecessor, William McKinley. Both great politicians. TR once said of McKinley that he kept his ear so close to the ground it was full of grasshoppers. It was also said of McKinley he looked as if he were posing for a statue. TR preferred to harass enemies, inspire friends, and rouse the public, generally from the elevated perch, not of a pedestal, but of a pulpit, what he called the bully pulpit, reflecting his celebrated and expansive theory of presidential stewardship. According to TR, a modern president was, quote, bound actively and affirmatively to do all he could for the people. I did not usurp power, he added, not altogether convincingly, but I did greatly broaden the use of executive power. In fact, under TR, the White House became a crowded theater, peopled by melodramatic heroes and villains. On stage was a never-ending morality play, scripted, directed, and performed by the president himself. The office was redefined by the youngest man ever to hold it. Beginning in 1901, the supreme test of presidential leadership became the ability to marshal public opinion by dramatizing oneself and one's program. A natural-born performer, Roosevelt summoned coal magnates and striking workers to settle their differences under his watchful gaze. He derided malefactors of wealth, much as his cousin Franklin 30 years later would strike out at the economic royalists, in whose hatred he gloried. TR read a book a day. His impressive vocabulary did not include the word modesty. Indeed, when running off the president's first message to Congress, it was said the government printing office exhausted its supply of the personal pronoun. The president had opinions on everything and took a child's delight in sharing them, from the virtues of phonetic spelling and the glories of the great outdoors to the pernicious effects of birth control, what TR called race suicide and the dangers of, quote, embalmed beef. For good measure, he denounced George Bernard Shaw as a blue-rumped ape, Tsar Nicholas II as a preposterous little creature, and critics of his domestic program as copper-riveted idiots and circumcised skunks. Roosevelt remade the physical White House as he redefined its symbolic place at the heart of the nation's political life. Smash the glass houses, he thundered. The glass houses were, in fact, the White House conservatories left over from James Buchanan, whom he detested. He always maintained that there were two kinds of presidents. There were Lincoln presidents and there were Buchanan presidents. And you had no doubt which one he was. Smash the glass houses, he said with the same glee he reserved for his enemies in Congress. And down came the sprawling conservatories first built before the Civil War. Out went President Arthur's Tiffany screens and President McKinley's potted palms. Mooseheads took up residence in the state dining room. Roosevelt himself moved his office into a new West Wing. The West Wing was actually created because Mrs. Roosevelt, if you go to the White House today, it's not Jackie Kennedy's White House that you see. It is Edith Roosevelt's, the second Mrs. Roosevelt. Alice, of course, died. Anyway, Edith Roosevelt, who once famously observed that she had 6 children, of whom Theodore was the youngest, she said something very logical. She said, this is, for 100 years, the White House had been an office building, as well as a residence, as well as a campaign headquarters, as well as a war room, you name it. Anyway, she said, basically, you're not going to work out of our home. You have to go somewhere else. So TR built the West Wing and the Oval Office. He also, however, did something very characteristic, which has certainly affected the presidency ever since. He made sure that there was a press room, which he would walk by every day on his way to work. Very often he could be prevailed upon to stop and give them some news. When the restoration was finished, 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue harkened back to the austere traditions of the early republic. White House coachmen donned livery and cockades, recalling the stiff formality of the Federalist era. And yet it is TR who renamed the Executive Mansion the White House. This combination of Federalist formality, steeped in the nation's history, and a very modern informality. TR is not a simple man. He's a very easy figure to caricature. In fact, if you go to the American Heritage Dictionary to this day, and you look up the word caricature, there's a picture of TR. Doesn't need to be explained. That's, I guess, a great caricature. While TR is credited with inventing the bully pulpit, he was in truth carrying on a custom as old as the nation's highest office. Long before there was a United States, there was a powerful sense of American exceptionalism. Even before there was a presidency, there was Alexander Hamilton's assertion in the Federalist Papers that an energetic and unified executive posed no threat to America's newly won liberties. Well, there was never a president as energetic as Theodore Roosevelt. In the words of his admirer, William Allen White, the gift of the gods to Theodore Roosevelt was joy in life. He took joy in everything he did, in hunting, camping, and ranching, in politics, in reforming the police or the civil service, in organizing and commanding the Rough Riders. And then White admitted, Roosevelt bit me and I went mad. Lots of Americans of his generation felt the same way. We are still reacting to Theodore Roosevelt. Think about the teddy bear. Think of the bully pulpit. Think of speak softly and carry a big stick. The term muckraker was invented by TR. He took from his prodigious reading. Actually, he took it from Pilgrim's Progress to describe a journalist, a new kind of journalist, who raked up the muck and who performed a valuable function, but who was too cynical to be entrusted with that function altogether.